She packed my bags last night, pre-flight.
Hi, this is the first in a series if this video does well. If it does, I'll follow up with other aircraft in the sim that present significant differences from each other in terms of the startup procedure. Following that, I'll do follow-ups that cover things like creating a flight plan, ATC interaction, takeoff, straight and level flight with trimming, flying the pattern, and landing both VFR and ILS. So you want to be a pilot? Well, the steps illustrated in this video are accurate and can be used with the real aircraft. Obviously, the sim will dictate some things as being simulated and not real, but I'll always point out what you must do in real life to do this procedure. This process is basically the same for any aircraft that you'll encounter, from this small Cessna to the Boeing 747 Intercontinental, with a few differences specific to each craft. I've seen a lot of FS2020 videos that talk about how to do this and give out bad or incorrect information. That won't happen here. In this video, we will pre-flight and start up the Cessna 152 aircraft from a cold and dark state. This will work with the stock 152 as well as the Aerobab version. As a side observation regarding the realism of FS2020, in terms of visuals, nothing can touch it, including professional and commercial simulators. In terms of actual flight simulators, it's not the greatest. If you want something that's more accurate in simulating the actual pilot's experience, you'll be better served by X-Plane 11, which is linked in the description. Before starting the aircraft, the pilot in charge, or PIC, will carry out a pre-flight checklist. If you want to skip this and go straight to the startup procedure, there's a link in the description that'll take you there. They'll also typically create a flight plan that includes things such as the weight of the aircraft, how much fuel will be needed to make the planned flight, and a variety of other elements relevant to making a safe flight. The checklists are typically laminated cards that indicate a series of steps that the PIC will need to carry out. This is part of the standard pre-flight preparation before any flight. There are digital versions as well for your tablet. I linked to a PDF version in the description. In real life, this process generally takes about 30 minutes before every flight. The Cessna 152 is a two-seater overwing piston engine general aviation aircraft. It's typically used for training, pleasure, and business. It was first delivered in 1977 and ceased production in 1985. A total of 23,949 of them were built, and most are still flying today. Before we start our pre-flight and startup, we need to ensure some automated features are disabled. The sim offers a checklist that we'll use to assist us in the engine startup procedure in this tutorial. In the main sim screen, you get to it from the top menu and then click on the checkmark item in the menu. You can have the sim automate the checklist for you as if your co-pilot was carrying out the tasks or checking them off for you as you do them. For this exercise, we need this turned off. From the main screen, go to the options screen and then the assistance screen. In the assistance screen, under the piloting preset, select hard. This will turn off the AI assist that'll get in our way. If you get to the checklist and see options for autocomplete page, evaluation, and autocomplete item, go to that options screen by hitting escape and carrying out the procedure we just discussed. Once you're done, hit escape, apply and save, and escape once more to return to the sim. When you then activate the checklist, you should see a checklist that looks like this with the tick item option at the bottom. You can also go to the menu at the top of the screen and click on the human head icon or AI control item and ensure that all of the items here are turned off. However, you'll have to restart the flight in order for them to take effect, whereas the assistance screen under options will immediately update the checklist properly. Our pre-flight starts inside the cabin. There's a few items that I'll mention but can't be carried out in the sim. For section 1 of our pre-flight, a confirmation of documents for the flight is carried out to confirm discrepancies and inspections. This will ensure that the craft is currently certified as legal to fly. We then confirm all required documents are present in the cabin. Now, depending upon what country you're from, your government's aviation authority may have different requirements for pre-flight, but for this video, I'll be following the USA's FAA guidelines where applicable. This is the Hobbs meter here, and it tells us how many hours our aircraft has flown, and in real life, we notate this in the log. For the sim, these items are irrelevant. I mention them only for completeness. At this point, we'd remove the control wheel lock. Again, it's not done in the sim. We confirm the ignition switch is off, the master battery switch here is on, and the master alternator switch is off. We confirm that the fuel gauges are not showing empty. The PIC will use other methods to determine both the type and quantity of fuel in the aircraft, as the fuel gauges are basically unreliable and shouldn't be depended on. Set the flaps to 30 degrees for the inspection outside. These are the large flight control surfaces on the inboard portions of the wings. Turn the master battery switch back off. And now we can set the fuel master switch to on. We can use the checklist for the fuel master switch so you can see how the checklist works. We bring up the checklist from the menu like this. Now we click on the Before Starting Engine section. The first item here is to open the fuel shutoff valve. We click on the checklist item to select it. Now we click on the eyeball icon on the right side, and the sim moves the camera to the control in question and highlights it in blue, as you can see here. Now we click on the shutoff valve to open it, and then back on the checklist we click on the tick item element at the bottom of the checklist screen to mark it as done. This completes Section 1 of the pre-flight. Section 2 focuses on the fuselage and empennage of the airframe. We need to ensure that we have the correct fuel type and we don't have condensation in the tanks. Some aircraft, such as the Cessna 182, have a rubber bladder in them and can trap water in the folds. For these situations, the PIC should rock the aircraft back and forth in an effort to move that water into the main tank area where it can be detected and removed. Obviously, we're not doing that here. At the cowl up front, we have this little door that the PIC will open, and there's a valve inside that the PIC will then operate while they place a fuel cup underneath this fuel drain line that's in the front landing gear well. Then they'll collect a sample of fuel. The PIC will verify the fuel type, and any water will appear in the fuel cup separated from the fuel, and if present, the PIC should take subsequent samples until no more moisture is present in the fuel cup. Any leftover fuel in the cup should be returned to the tank. Following this, the PIC will make a visual inspection of the fuselage and empennage to check for any visible signs of wear or damage that might affect the operation of the aircraft. After this, the tail tie-down is removed, followed by the rudder and elevator gust locks. They look like this and lock these control surfaces into position to prevent them from being damaged by the wind. This is followed by an inspection of the rudder and elevator to ensure they're functioning. Finally, another walk around for the fuselage and empennage to make a final check for any visible issues. Section 3 of our checklist begins with the right or starboard wing's trailing edge to inspect the flap and the ailerons function to check for any visual issues. The right wing tie-down is removed and the undercarriage is inspected to ensure there's no visible damage and the tire is in good shape and properly inflated. There are 2 fuel tanks, one in each wing that holds 13 gallons each. Each wing has a fuel sample point, and a sample is taken from the right wing tank to check for water and fuel type. Using this handle and this step, the PIC gets up on the wing and opens the right wing's fuel cap. The PIC then checks the fuel level with a dipstick to ensure the appropriate amount of fuel is on board for the planned flight. A visual inspection of the wing surface is performed, and finally, the right side window and co-pilot's windshield is cleaned. Section 4's focus is the nose and cowl area of the aircraft where the oil level is checked. A visual inspection of the prop is carried out with the same level of caution as if it were a live prop, since the magneto might actually be on. It's treated like a gun, and a gun is always treated as if it's loaded. The alternator's belt is checked for play and wear. The oil cooler is inspected for any obstructions. The landing light is cleaned. The air filter is cleared of any obstructions. The nose wheel is inspected for wear and inflation, and finally a visual inspection of the static port on the side of the aircraft is carried out. The left wing gets the same treatment as the right, with the addition of an inspection of the stall horn and the pitot tube, not having any obstructions. The exterior pre-flight inspection is complete and the wheel chocks are removed in preparation for flight. At this point, you'd carry out a passenger briefing if you're carrying one that includes information about the flight itself and what the passenger can expect. You then get into the aircraft with your passenger and ensure that both of you have your seatbelts fastened and don your headset. You open the windows for some ventilation and your clear call, more on that in a bit, and begin the pre-starting part of the checklist. Next, we check the brakes and set the parking brake using our handy checklist like this. Visually confirm that all the circuit breakers are pushed in. They have no function in the sim, by the way. This is just for completeness again. If you need to restore the camera to its default pilot position, go to the top menu here and click on the camera icon. Down at the bottom here, select Copilot followed by Pilot. Next up, we'll set the fuel mixture to rich by pushing it all the way in like this. The fuel mixture controls the ratio of fuel to air in the carburetor. At ground level here, we're at the maximum air pressure that we'll have during our flight unless we plan to fly into an area whose altitude is lower than the airfield. As we gain altitude, the air pressure lowers and the PIC will need to adjust the mixture during the flight in order to maintain RPM and power in the engine. One of the benefits of altitude, besides giving you time to make decisions and aviate before you hit the ground, is that you'll use less fuel. You generally account for this in your flight plan. Next, we'll ensure that the carb heat is set to cold or off. Since a carburetor has a venturi section in it where the air is compressed, air gets colder when it passes through this area and ice can form. Weather and humidity are the determining factors for this occurring, but at takeoff we need to ensure that it's turned off. It reroutes the air intake away from this intake at the front, which has a filter on it, over to an unfiltered heat exchanger around the engine's exhaust. Since most airports are around industrial areas or dusty fields, the air pollution at the airfield is usually pretty high, and we don't want the filthy air going into our engine and precipitating a failure. Now we turn the master battery switch back on, followed by the beacon and strobe light switches. The beacon light is used to prevent collisions, mostly on the ground. It's located on the top of the vertical stabilizer on the Cessna 152. Other aircraft will usually have another one at the bottom of the empennage here. The strobe, also used to prevent collisions, is located on the tips of the wings. We make sure the key is in the ignition, we turn it for the left mag, then the right mag, and then both mags, and we open the throttle about a ½ inch. 20% will do for us here. At this point, the PIC will shout the word clear out of the pilot's side window that we opened at the start of this to warn anyone adjacent to the aircraft that we're starting it up and there'll be a dangerous propeller spinning in a moment. Finally, we pump the engine primer here 3 times like this, assuming the engine is cold. Now turn the ignition to the momentary start position and the engine starts up. Once the engine is running, the PIC will reduce the throttle to about 10% to achieve about 1,000 RPM or less. At this point, we watch the oil pressure gauge to make sure it's rising into the green, and then we turn the alternator master switch to on. Normally, we would watch the ammeter on the co-pilot side to ensure that it's charging the battery by ensuring that the needle showed positive and not negative. But in this version of FS2020 that I'm using for this video, version 1.9.3.0, the alternator master switch doesn't work properly and the ammeter doesn't work either, so this is just for completeness. Set the flaps to the up position. We can tick the oil pressure elements and the flashing beacon and navigation light elements since they're already complete, and we're done. Now we normally turn on our radio and avionics at this point, but we turned them on previously. Other aircraft or avionics setups in the 152 will let you turn them on last, and this gives them a measure of protection from an electrical surge during the prep and start of the engine. We'd also turn on the transponder, and we would normally set a squawk value of 1200 here or to the one you were assigned by the ATC. Then release the parking brake, taxi to the run-up area after your initial ATC contact and clearance. That's it. Now you would do your final prep for takeoff. Before we wrap this up, I want to take a moment to talk about the master switch bug in this aircraft. Supposedly, this bug is also present in the Cessna 172. There's a mod you can use for the 152 that corrects this issue as well as a myriad of other accuracy issues with this model, and I've linked to it in the description. Ideally, in the aircraft, you would use the battery master switch to supply the initial power to the aircraft as well as to start it up. Once the engine's running, you would then switch to the alternator master so that it can supply power to the aircraft as well as charge its battery, just as a car does. An alternator is similar to a generator in that it converts rotational energy into electrical current, though unlike a generator that creates direct current, the alternator creates alternating current, hence its name. This is then sent to a rectifier to convert it to direct current. An alternator is used since it's lighter and more reliable than a generator, as well as it generates a useful current at a lower RPM than a generator. That's it for this video. If you didn't like the video, please hit the dislike, but if it helped you at all, please hit that like. That helps me understand the types of videos that are working for you folks. So I'll see you in the next video, and until then, Take care.